on the internet or a commander or whoever it is, it gets you fired sometimes. It makes you bad news Turner in my case.
It depends on how you deliver it though, man. You got to deliver it right. If you're going to come back with facts that counter somebody else's garbage, you got to deliver it right. And that's the whole like charisma aspect that goes in. And in the military and law enforcement, paramilitary, whatever it is that you're out there doing, tact is key. And if you really want to take in some psychology into it, you got to get them to believe it's their idea, what you want to move forward. So you have them come up with the idea. And then you're moving.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to talk to you about is the Trump presidency starts out like gangbusters, still gangbusters. It's like they are not slowing down. They are just moving faster than the enemy can respond.
Right. Yeah.
It's shocking. I don't even know what to bring up first because it's like, well, 5 days ago, this was happening. That's already old news. Like he turned on the water to California. I live in California. Hell, I appreciate it. We have real problems with our water law here, right?
Right.
It's a fair criticism,
Yeah. So turning on California is great. Signing an executive order, getting rid of men out of women's sports. Awesome call. Securing our borders. Awesome call. Putting Canada in check, I think is a pretty dang decent call. We had more people from the foreign terror watch list get arrested on the Canadian border last year and all 3 years prior than we did at the southern border.
Yeah.
I think there might be a problem.
Yeah. Well, and it is a giant border. It is even harder to defend than the Mexican border.
Right.
And, you're right. If there's people leaking through, we have to deal with that. We can't just ignore a threat because there's good people coming through trying to have a better life. And I'll just say this. I don't know any American, and I know a lot of people who was against immigrants coming here because they want the American dream. Like that's my favorite American is the next one. I like all those guys. I want there to be a better system. There isn't. So some people are sneaking in. Okay, well, we'll stand that. But we have to be able to provision that. We can't just... I went down to Del Rio, Texas, and I talked to the judge in charge of the response. And I did this because the vice president wouldn't go down. I talked to him, and he's like, I'm a Democrat. These guys are screwing me. They haven't given me any money. I mean, look, just think about, the number of nations that have sent people here. Like, how many interpreters is that? And they have to be on call. What does that cost you? And he's like, that's interpreters, man. And like hotel rooms. There's no hotel rooms in Del Rio, Texas, if you've got 50 different interpreters and supplementary. I mean, they just weren't provisioned for any of it. And so we have to have a better system. And until then, we gotta deal with what's here already.
Well, and it's funny, right? So you're never going to have a perfect legal system. And it doesn't matter if it's like criminal, civil, whatever, the system's built for a massive amount of people. And so there's going to be failures and hiccups and you're never going to get it perfect. But it's very clear looking at this one that it's broke. It's not working correct because nobody can get, like, the people that are applying to get in. It's a very long and painful process. Right. And then prior to a couple of weeks ago, you could just walk your happy butt across the border and get moved on with your life, potentially.
Yeah. And if you wanted to be granted asylum guaranteed, you say, I'm gay. And if I go home, they'll kill me. And that's instant asylum. That's coachable to anybody. And look, nobody wants anybody to get persecuted or killed, but that's how easy it is to get an asylum case. And if you are a nefarious actor, it's guaranteed you're going to get in. You're going to get cared for. We're going to bring the nefarious actor into whatever city. We're going to give them money. We're going to give them resources. And that doesn't make sense to the vast majority of us. None of us want that. No. Do we mind a little bit of it coming in here and there? Oh, okay, sure. Right. As long as we get a lot of good people coming in too. But at some point, you have to have some kind of control.
Yeah, no, I 100% totally agree. Like, you have to have control at some point. And right now we just seem like it's getting back in order, but it's going to be a long way ahead. And I think the big problem that we're going to have with the cartels down on the southern border is these laws haven't actually been enforced before. And they do make a lot of money off of those people crossing the border. You're a couple grand a head multiplied by all of the people they're crossing on a daily basis. That's a lot of money, just that alone, plus the amount of money that they're going to end up getting from the drugs that are flowing back and forth with them. Plus some of those people, when you have bodies going north, bodies also go south. And some of those bodies going south aren't people that want to leave this country. And I think that's important for people to realize when we talk about shutting this stuff down is you are talking about actual cases of human trafficking. and they are 100% complicit in it.
The human trafficking piece is horrific, and it's a moneymaker, like you said. I just had a guy named Hal Bradley on the show. He grew up with the cartels and then smuggled in the 70s, 80s, went to jail for a while, and then came back and flipped on them and became, our guy. And he went and started taking down cartels. And so he knows their business. And we were talking about the fact like this is a multi-billion-dollar business, and they're not just going to go away. They're going to adapt to the environment around them. And if they have to adapt more, then it's going to be harder for them. And by the way, one of the things we discussed was there will be an envoy that will approach the president, and they will broker some kind of deal, because ultimately their power has to remain in some way so that Mexico doesn't destabilize and become worse, right? And so there's a lot of that give and take that has to happen. We don't even think about that. But if we can get fentanyl to go down, if we can get the human trafficking to go down and find a way to, and, President Trump probably will be like, why don't we get you guys a whole bunch of condos? You can rent those out, make money that way, whatever it is. There'll have to be some kind of brokered deal, because you don't just get to unplug something and then walk away and be like, no harm, no foul.
I don't think there is going to be a brokered deal.
Okay.
I don't think there is going to be a brokered deal. I think it's going to be like, Trump's designated them as a foreign terror organization. Like, it's done. And so at that point, he's got a very firm stance, and as it should be, of we don't negotiate with terrorists, period. We're not going to put up with your BS. And I say that, and then I go back to, what was it? The Doha agreement, right? With us and the Taliban. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, look, they were in violation of it. And looking at the Taliban, are they a terror organization? Absolutely, they are. Anybody that had ever served in that war knows 1000% that the Taliban had to be incorporated into the Afghan government at some point in time, because there were so many areas of that country that the government of Afghanistan didn't want to touch. They didn't want to put their hands on at all. And so the Taliban was effectively the government in that area. That is not what we're dealing with here. And this war is going to be fought on our home soil. I think our neighbors are going to learn of this with their own eyes. I think a lot of people listening to this will learn of it with their own eyes.
Yeah. Back to the Taliban thing, I'd be out talking to farmers. This is Taliban country. Mullah Omar, wherever I'm at, he's within 50 miles of me, within 2 miles of all the major camps in Zabul, right? And that's where that guy was. And Mr. Big Shot Spy had no idea, but nobody else did either, right? Like he was there, he was entrenched, and he wasn't going to be given up. So you're right. And the farmer's like, well, the Taliban, it's my family. I'm not Taliban, but they're all around me. They're my cousins, they're my uncles. And when you guys leave, they're still going to be here. And by the way, and this is the kicker of all, your President Obama, is negotiating with them right now. And I'm like, let me write that down. You write that down, because we know it's true. And then you hand it to us, and we're like, he's not going to negotiate. Next day, headline, Obama, Taliban negotiate. You're like, all right, what are we doing here, right? But I do think that there is some of that in the Mexican cartel world. I mean, they're just so powerful that I don't know how you turn off that power without causing a bigger problem.
Well, you're going to have bloodshed first. And that bloodshed is what I'm worried about here for the people on the home front, right? Because now we have thousands upon thousands of terrorists overnight here inside of this country. And they have some pretty loyal foot soldiers. And I wouldn't be surprised if, some of these cartels, once we actually start picking them off and taking their leaders out, that we either see our politicians, we see our law enforcement officers, first responders, or just people in general being targeted by them. I can see that happening. I can see Border Patrol agents coming under tremendous fire, like actual attacks,
Sure.
But with that being said, now we're going to have military might that's down there on the border. And, designating them a foreign terror organization is much different than just trying to say we're going to launch a war against drugs and trying to do things legally within the confines of the law. As soon as we do that and we designate them a foreign terror organization, now it opens up the opportunity for a military to legally target them along with the Defense Intelligence Agency. And so you're essentially like quadrupling your assets that you have to start narrowing in on these people. That's like full weight of that government plus the DIA, or plus the DEA. Like everybody's gonna be able to start narrowing in on you. So it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah. It opens the aperture on the legal side too, right? So it's like now a lot less things are against the law. People understand like what every summer they're like, where are all these military vehicles going? They're going on their summer maneuvers. They're just going to train, calm down. It's very hard to put a guard dude with a magazine and his weapon all in the same vicinity. Very hard to do that in America, and you have to satisfy certain things to have that happen. So what folks don't understand is that there's a lot of legal barriers. So when you designate something a terrorist organization, you open up task force capability, international capability. A lot of capability comes with that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I look forward to kind of seeing how it's all going to unwind. And ideally, I believe it was one of the reporters that asked Trump as he was signing that executive order, would you consider sending the special forces down after him? And he's like, nothing's off the table. And people are looking at that as if that is going to be some miraculous door kicking in exercise. And that's just not how that's going to work. I don't think our government wants to be sending in SEAL teams, Green Berets, MARSOC operators, recon guys. Like, they don't want to be doing that over and over and over and start stacking up casualties. Like, we'd kill the shit out of them. Don't get me wrong. But I don't think they're going to want to see, because bullets go both ways and they don't differentiate between what cool guy course you've been through. So eventually people are going to start getting hit. The much more wise way, I think, for that to go about being executed is using MARSOC, is using Green Berets. So take the Raiders, take the GBs, send them down there and start actually training, advising, and assisting the Mexican government to go after them with assistance from U.S. air support to be able to start actioning a lot of these targets. They're likely developing as we speak, and they probably got a stack of freaking target packets, So.
Is it too neocon-y to say, hey, you guys have plussed up your force on the border. Why don't we come across with a brigade or 3 battalions or whatever it's going to be? And we'll advise and assist and help you and cooperate with you, but you guys lead the charge. Is that too neoconish, or do you think that happens as well?
No, I mean, we could easily get a SOFA agreement and push forward. My question would be, what's the objective of doing it? If our objective is to create, which I think would be wise, buffer space in between the U.S. Mexican border so that, we are not directly staring at them. So for me, it would be a protection of force, because just like we saw with those border patrol agents where they got fired on the other day as they go to interdict some illegals that are crossing, we need that buffer space to be able to control that border. And we can't go back and create any buffer space that way. So our only option would be to go forward. With that being said, I don't think it's going to be applicable in every single location, but I think a lot of them, you would have a good application for that. So it is a huge possibility.
Yeah. Gaza, that freaked people out. Yesterday? So what do you think on President Trump's comments? He often speaks off the cuff, right? Just sort of like no filter from his brain to his mouth. Do you think, what do you think? That's my question.
What do I think about Gaza and him speaking off the cuff? Well, I think he's being way nicer than he should be. And the idea that you can rebuild, which, by the way, I don't agree with that decision. Matt's personal thought process on this is you sleep in the bed that you make. And they 1000% made that bed, and they ought to be sleeping in it, right? The demining operations he talked about absolutely need to take place. Figure came out yesterday, estimated 30,000 UXO, unexploded ordnance inside Gaza. I mean, that's over 1 per square kilometer, right? Like, that's a lot over there inside there. And likely on top of that, you're also going to have the weapons manufacturing facilities. You're going to have the places where they're mixing up propellant for the rockets and homemade explosives, all of that stuff. You're going to have CNC machines for some of those rifles and things like that they're building out there. All of that crap needs to get decommissioned and taken out. And so that is a very long, laborious process. Now, they have also, we've seen Hamas use houseborne IEDs recently over inside Gaza. It just took them a little. I think the first one documented was actually down in Khan Yunis before they went into Rafah. And then following Rafah is when they went back in Jabalia, we ended up seeing a lot of them. And so I have no doubt that there's lots of those that have yet to be triggered that are just laying in wait. And that's dangerous as hell. It would be extremely irresponsible of us to say, go home, it's safe, knowing that there's that much UXO on the ground. Additionally, it's a danger for Israel. It's a massive danger for Israel. 100% of Hamas is Palestinian. 100%, right? And they have the vast majority support from their population. And so all of those munitions being laid around, they're just going to pick them up, repurpose them, and reuse them as long as it's safe for them to do so. So no, we can't leave 30,000 UXO laying around Gaza, especially if they're freaking 2,000-pound bombs. Like, no, that's not okay.
Yeah. And this is just going to remain true. Like, whatever the answer is going to be, it may not work, because that has been the norm there. And neither side wants a 2-state solution. That's fact. Netanyahu has said it. Clearly, Hamas has said it. And so it can't be this thing that we want here. It has to be a solution that will work there. And,
okay,
moving the Gazans out and relocating it, that might be it. Maybe.
Well, no, it's not it. Because again, and this is the problem, right? And it's the human terrain aspect. I feel like we touched on this the last time we talked: physical terrain versus human terrain. And it's the equivalent, in my opinion, of when you have a medical issue with you, right? You can treat symptoms or you can treat the actual disease that you have, right? And what we've been doing with this by going in and just shooting Hamas is all we're doing is we're wiping our nose and maybe taking some cold medication when really we need some antiviral. Really, we need something that's going to go in and actually like solve this problem. Problem is overwhelmingly obvious that it's radical Islamic ideology that has taken root in Gaza, and it has for decades. And it gets passed down from generation to generation to generation. I can go find video after video after video of these young children, like asking, why did Hitler leave Jews? Oh, so that we could see how evil they are. So we know how bad they are. And they're in their simulators and they're shooting kids and they're doing all of the or shooting Israelis, teaching them how to go and kidnap people. I mean, all of this stuff is on video and it came out way before October 7th and it was published by them, right? They allowed these reporters to come in and do that stuff. So it's the ideology that is the real issue, right? Like your immediate threat is stopping the rounds from being fired. But if you don't solve the disease, they're just going to rebuild and reorganize and reattack. And like that's it. So that's not a risk you can take. And also, you send them out into other countries, you send them out into Qatar, you send them over to Egypt. I voted for Trump. I don't agree with everything he does. And that's how it should be, right? I should be able to say, I agree with this decision and I really don't agree with this decision. Same thing with Biden. There were some things that Biden did that I kind of agreed with. Doesn't mean I thought he did an amazing job at all, but at least I'm man enough to recognize and give props where props are due. Right. This is a horrible idea. Yeah. You can't send these people to Qatar. You can't send them to Jordan. You can't send them to Egypt because they're going to take that radical ideology and spread it.
Yeah.
And my biggest concern, bro, let me tell you what my biggest concern is.
Yeah.
Number one, there's no distinguishing who's been pulling triggers and who hasn't. So August of 2024, a battalion commander's letter inside of Khan Yunis got recovered by the Israeli Defense Force, and they published it so that we could see it. And what he had said was that 50% of his force had been killed or wounded, and 25% had been defected, and the remaining 25% are essentially combat ineffective. So 25% of his force had defected at that point in time. Defected. Yeah. Right? Likely because of how in dire straits they were with ammunition, their ability to fight. So those people that were willing to pick up those guns are now floating around the population. They're out there.
Yeah.
And those are the people that we have no way of screening, no way of knowing who they were, that we're going to go send to all of these other countries and build houses for them. Not with my tax dollars. Absolutely not.
Yeah. It's, whether it's Mexico, Gaza, wherever it's going to be, a dock, which is one of the things I want to get to, a dock out in the Mediterranean that failed. These things that, maybe they brief well, but a lot of us, guys like us, were like, "Oh, hold on, we can't even move whatever reliably. You're going to go build a dock in the Mediterranean and expect no one to get hurt."
All right,
go ahead.
Nobody wants a two-state solution, right? They all want a one-state solution. So I say Israel goes along with a one-state solution, right? Or I'm sorry, I say go against the grain, give them a two-state solution. Give them Gaza, 100%. Recognize it as a nation, allow it to happen. Israel as its own country, just like the United States, we control what comes in and what goes out of our borders. We do. Right? So Israel has that exact same right, and that would include any supplies that go into Gaza. Additionally, we could use international pressure, right? Like actual political pressure on Egypt to do the exact same thing. And if they don't, then we're going to pop the nipple out of their mouth and they're not getting another dime. They're going to, we'll bastardize them, right? They will collapse if we do that. So they will concede. Then as a nation, obviously they're a state sponsor of terror at that point, sanction the crap out of them, put in a maritime blockade like used to exist, put in a freaking aerial blockade because Iran's going to be trying to fly weapons and equipment in there just like they were dropping it off in the Med beforehand. Put all of those in, treat them like the terrorist nation that they are, and let them fizzle out. Israel is under zero obligation whatsoever to do a dang thing for those people. None.
Yeah. I was thinking about Ayman Dean and Adam Gamal. These are guys who, I don't know if you know Ayman or not, but you know who Adam is. These guys understand Islam at a high level. Those guys need to have the ear of the boss. And Ayman's British, right? So maybe you don't bring him in for some reason, but maybe you do. Either way, to understand that, right? Like we suck. And I've written academic papers on this. We suck at accepting that religion is part of the government in a lot of these places. Like we wanted to act like church and state were separate in a place where Allah Akbar was written on the flag. And then the other place, the word Islamic was in the title of the government in Afghanistan. So we have to get smarter about not trying to beat people with religion, but just don't lose so much. We get our asses kicked all the time. Here's a great example. So when those, I think it was Marines, got in trouble for pissing on Qurans, or throwing in the burn pit.
They pissed on Taliban. They were pissing on the Taliban.
Either way, every time the Taliban burned a school, you know what's in every school in Afghanistan? A fucking Quran, right? And so we didn't know to flip that on them. And so our Jordanian partners would be like, you guys are dumb. These guys are doing dumb stuff that's not against the Quran, And we had a governor where I was working, and he was governor, but also former mujahideen, and then also a holy man. And so he's like, I will use the power of Islam to get these people to behave. And he was doing it.
Correct.
We had to leave.
Thank you.
But we allowed him to use religion. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So why haven't we recognized this as a religious war? Would you just on face value, knowing what you know about Hamas, would you think that's a religious war? What they are waging is a religious war.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem saying that. Yeah, could it be that I don't have enough understanding that? Like Iraq was not a religious war, right? Like the Sunni-Shia conflict was more like blacks versus whites, and then Kurds mixed in. And so that's my only hesitation is that there's things that I don't understand. But as soon as a Shia dude walked in, didn't matter what kind of God he believed in. It mattered how he buttoned his shirt. And those guys were from the other side. They were a Democrat. I'm a Republican, whatever it's going to be. Right. So, but with Hamas, no, they fucking hate the Jews.
Well, it's clearly stated. I can put it up on my screen if you want, but they clearly state it. Clearly stated numerous times. It's their divine right to conquer Israel. Very clearly stated, and that they're able to do it through all means and methods. And so that means that if it's their divine right to conquer Israel, that's what they're stating. It's their divine right, and they can do it by all means and methods, and they make it very, very clear. So if it's their divine right to do so, they're not going to abide by human laws or man-made laws. We saw that on October 7th, and we've seen that a million times since, when you've got 14-year-old kids that jump a fence and start stabbing police officers over inside Israel, right? So they don't abide by man-made laws. Why do we think that they would do it just because we build them a house? The only difference is they're going to be more comfortable when they're planning their next attack. Yeah,
they had a pretty nice house the last time, and they destroyed their own area to make it a interwoven bomb, basically, of tunnels and bombs and fuck their people. And we hope that a bunch of people get atrocities because we can leverage, messaging. They use people for messaging is what they did. And then Iran celebrates while they're doing all this stuff. And so if you're the boss and you see that, it's like, hey, I'm going to get on the honker. You got 5 minutes to knock that shit off. Every time I see any of this stuff creep out, you're going to get a little dose of something, and I can see Donald Trump being a little more aggressive there. But if Iran's power regime is not struggling to stay on top, it doesn't need much to get it there. And do we want to topple, Iranian governor? I don't know, but they need a comeuppance. They don't get to destabilize a region like that. Somehow or another, they got Sunnis and Shias to work together to cross purposes. Like it's pretty crazy.
Well, you see the same thing in Afghanistan, right? Like you see this with a bunch of the different jihadist organizations to where when they have a common goal, they can come together. And that's not unheard of these days. 20 years ago, it was absolutely unheard of. They'd be killing each other. And so we had sectarian violence that was going on a lot, right? But they've kind of put a lot of those beliefs aside to start working together. Trump started off with Iran by sanctions, right? So announcing sanctions against Iran, that's a good start. And I think before you do anything militarily, you should absolutely start politically to let them know that you mean business. But the simple fact is that they have developed and just test fired a ballistic missile capable of reaching over to the EU. Fact. Yeah. And so if the next question is, are they nuclear capable? Yes, we know they have that technology and it's nuclear capable. It's stuff that was given to them by North Korea, got documented, I think, back in like 2016. But additionally, okay, well, now do you have a nuclear warhead? Well, back in July, they end up putting 135 new centrifuges online. IAEA states that as soon as those centrifuges are online, within 30 days, they'll have enough enriched uranium to make nuclear weapons. So now that's not just a danger to the EU. Now that's a danger to Israel and every U.S. base within 1,000-kilometer range. It's a problem. Right. And we can't allow them to get there. You don't, as a nation, get to, scream death to Israel, death to America, death to the Jews. You can't do that and develop nuclear weapons after conducting the amount of ballistic and missile attacks that you did on Israel this year. We cannot allow that to happen.
People don't often realize this, but you can drive from Tehran to Paris, and it just doesn't take that long. Am I saying you'll get through 100 times out of 100? No. But you also don't got to get to Paris. You can get to a lot of places from Tehran. It's just not that far. And you're talking like distances, Dallas to Seattle. Nope, that's too far. It's less far than that to get to all these places.
Yeah, it's crazy. Or how about Isfahan to the Al Assad Air Base? How nice would it be to dead a nuke right over top of that sucker? It's a very strategic location for the U.S. and the Middle East. So you don't even need like a long range ballistic missile in order to reach that sucker.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of targets that could be hit over there within that region. I don't know if they're going to be capable of it, but they're targets nonetheless. And then we look at the Houthis and them supplying the Houthis, and you got, what is it, Camp Lemonnier over in Djibouti, Africa, stone's throw away. I mean, there's a lot of issues that need to be solved here, and we can't just turn a blind eye to it and act like it didn't happen. Dealing with Hamas, dealing with Hezbollah, dealing with the Houthis, all separate, is, again, it's a symptom. It's wiping your nose. It's not going back and solving the disease, which would be Iran, that needs to actually be dealt with.
Is Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, is he up to that?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Why?
Yeah. I think Rubio is going to be up to it. I think the SecDep's going to be up to it. Just the overall understanding of Iran, the overall understanding of how much they're meddling with, his stance when it comes. I think he's going to be okay. Obviously, I can't predict what another human being is going to do. The other thing that I think a lot of us forget, is all operations are intelligence driven. Every operation is driven by intelligence, all of them, right? Whether it's human, whether it's map recon, whatever, it's all driven by intel. I don't have the same intel that Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump do. And so I can speculate and I can say it would be wise to do X, Y, and Z, but they likely are going to know a heck of a lot more than I do for that decision-making process.
They also get to think in a bigger scope too. Like how do we create off-ramps? How do we point out the off-ramps? Because you can build them. The other guy doesn't know that they're there. And so they've got to manage their words. It's like when you hear the president say, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do. I got to wait. I got to go do it. I think anybody should be skeptical, right? Like we've seen a lot. These guys are doing a lot. There's going to be mistakes. When you do this much stuff, there's just going to be some fallout that you don't expect. If you don't do anything, there's going to be fallout you don't expect. But I just 100%. I worry that they're doing so many things so fast that it's going to become a shitstorm that doesn't benefit anybody. And look, when you want the job, you get all the criticism, you get all the slings and arrows. And President Trump has made a lot of people feel uneasy about him, his approach, and I don't know, that it's really going to be hard for him to get us going in the same direction, especially if their chaos creates some bad chaos for them.
No, who's uneasy?
No,
right? Who's uneasy? Yeah, a lot of people are uneasy.
Who are politically aligned against him. I mean, he deserves that. He said things on purpose to divide us, and we remain divided.
Well, and that's the problem with America. Right? We can't recognize people. And I made a post about this the other day on Twitter. Like, why is it that I can, as a regular human being of average intelligence, say that when Joe Biden does something good that I perceive as good, that I can say that, but I will lose followers. Right. When Donald Trump does something as good that I perceive as good, that I'll lose followers, and vice versa. When they screw up and I perceive it as a screw up, I will state that. Same thing for Trump. I did that this morning. I ragged on him hard for over an hour, saying that it's the dumbest idea to build these people freaking really nice buildings thinking that it's going to end jihad, because it's not. You know, like they'll be comfortable
Yeah.
planning out their next jihad. So
Yeah.
no, that's stupid. We need to treat the problem. But again, people can't have those discussions because it hurts their feelings. It hurts their opinions. You know, they're so deeply ingrained in all of this, but that's the only way to have an honest discussion about all of these things. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. A great breakdown of that whole area and that movement. What else do you want? There's been so many executive orders. Unless you want to go to the pier and talk about all of that, and we could talk about Kent and Stacy and all these.
Man, I mean, we could talk. Can we talk about Jelani? Like, how the hell did he? Why did we remove a bounty on his head? Why did we even feel the need to discuss anything with him, for that matter? And then the official from the State Department, I don't remember who it was. It was a female, if I remember correctly, saying that we have reason to believe that he's turned another leaf. Jelani, and for those who don't know who we're talking about, he is now the de facto leader in Syria. He declared himself president the other day, right? Yeah. This guy, number one, used to work for Al-Qaeda in Iraq. He was like top lead guy for Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and he used to work beside al-Baghdadi. Al-Baghdadi sends him to Syria to go recruit for AQI. And then, right around the same time that al-Baghdadi wants to start up ISIS, we've got Jelani. He starts up the al-Nusra Front, whose stated goal was to overthrow the Assad regime and establish a Sunni Islamic caliphate. And he fought for that for years until he started balling up more organizations underneath his belt. And then he switched to where he's at now with HTS. And now, after all of these years, after doing all of the crap that he's done, he's going to put on a suit and tie and we're going to believe that his religious ideology has somehow changed? Have we lost our minds?
It has not changed.
Have we lost our minds? Yeah, right. And so, I mean, that to me is going to be a very, very huge threat to Israel. They can play nice. They can put themselves on their international stage. They're allowed to lie. They're allowed to do whatever they want to get there. At the end of the day, the man's a terrorist, period. You do things like that for as long as you did, that is ingrained deep in your belief system, deep, deep, deep within your belief system. And I'm not aware of any sort of cataclysmic event that would have changed his mind at all. So what evidence do we have that supports that he's a changed man other than somebody from the State Department saying we've got a little faith in him?
Yeah. I mean, you always have faith in the person you've bet on, right? Like we have faith in Ukraine and being less corrupt, and everybody talks about all the work they're doing. You talk to anybody on the inside, there's still just tons of corruption, right? Here's just for anybody watching who doesn't know, the legal system in Ukraine is so corrupt that you can say, hey, I can't get a fair case here. And you can go up to the European court level and they'll find clearly in your behavior, like, yeah, that's a whole bunch of fuckery. And so you'll take your I-1 sheet down to Ukraine and they're like, not enforceable here. So, all of these things go into this whole corruption thing. So sure, we can say that it's a less corrupt country, but
knowing what you know about USAID, what government is more corrupt?
Oh, listen, you got me started on USAID. My blood pressure.
What government is more corrupt, man? Like pot, this is kettle, right? And so, maybe, what government doesn't have corruption?
Yeah.
What government doesn't?
We love to. I'm going to be hard on the State Department real quick here too, because they love to pick those. I like to say, like they snap a chalk line, and anybody on this side of the chalk line is bad. Even if they don't give a fuck all about us, right? That they all of a sudden become the bad guy, and everybody on this side is good. And we reliably pick the felon to lead the next country, because they satisfy some kind of need that we have. We do this all the time. And then we bring in our own problems, right? So not only are we corrupt, we bring in like, hey, you guys don't have enough, whatever, chicks with dicks or whatever it's going to be. Let's make sure we fund these things, right? We do this all the time, and State Department, USAID are both parts of it. I've had USAID jam lies into my mouth. I didn't know this. I'm like, hey, they're going to work on this project for you. This is really good. We should all work together on this. And then have them be like, what project? No, that money dried up 6 months ago. And I'm like, motherfucker, I was talking to you a month ago about this.
Right.
And you're going to tell me now I'm going to get shot out there because you're making me a liar.
Right. Or how many times on objectives I've seen like UNICEF stuff or USAID stuff like scattered all over the place. I mean, it's sad. And I don't think we should be supporting them. I don't think we should be supporting UNRWA. UNRWA within itself is corrupt as hell. And I don't think it's the fault of UNRWA. I mean, they're hiring employees straight out of Gaza. I mean, what do you expect? Right? What do you expect? But there's also the question that everybody should be asking, which is, if Israel's had to leave Gaza or have supply trains running into Gaza numerous times because they are running out of ammo, how is it that Hamas, even after the shutdown of the Philadelphia corridor or, the Egyptian border, the Rafah border crossing, how is it that after shutting that down, they're still able to continue to fight? And the only answer that you get out of that is, okay, well, let's look at what we know is going in and out. And wouldn't you know it, Hamas is stealing the humanitarian aid trucks. Yeah. So they know specific convoys, trucks, et cetera, or movement dates that they're going to be coming through. They're taking that stuff and they're securing it. I've talked to guys that are PMCs, private military contractors, that were tasked with screening that stuff. And they had to sign non-disclosure agreements so that they can't talk about the stuff that they find in there. It's absurd. So no, cut their funding off. Stop the flow of that crap. If that's what you're going to use, it needs stopped.
Yeah. And that's by design, right? They know that these things will happen. It's kind of like when you watch Die Hard and they know how the FBI is going to respond. And so they act accordingly to use that to their advantage. This is 100% true. And I know a guy that works on a lot of the negotiation and getting things brought in. I don't know if you know Dave Eubank as well. These guys fill gaps where you're trying to bring aid into a tough place. Mm-hmm. And even that is tenuous, right? Because you're trying to rely on people that don't want to do things and somehow get them to agree to do something. And they can always lie to you. They can always say, yeah, we are going to allow that to come in and get to the people. And they just do something else.
Yep. Yeah. I wish I was an Islamic scholar. I really do wish I was, because that could solve a lot of problems really quick by having the right people apply the proper education. But first things first, you got to get rid of the problem. Like you got to get rid of your immediate threat, and then you got to clear it, and then you got to worry about everything else. So security first and foremost, and then move on from there.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Security is complicated because, and again, this is a lesson from Afghanistan. So the dude has to be able to leave the house and go to work and not be molested along the way. I'm saying molested, like attacked, whatever it's going to be. Yeah, I'm just saying for the audience, like we're not talking about actual molest, because that apparently I have to clarify that now because of all the other things going on. And then mama at the compound has to be safe when he leaves. Yep. So 2 levels of, and then third is kids can project from the compound and go out to school and come back and not be bothered. And if those 3 things can be mixed together, that starts to become security. But then you also have to have people believe it. We live in a remarkably safe country here. People are convinced it's dangerous every goddamn day. There are dangerous things, but there are also 350 million of us. And you look around, like pretty much everybody had a great day. And then tomorrow, pretty much everybody's going to have a great day. So we lose sight of that. So the specter of threat is always bigger than the actual threat. But of course, when you're the person who's standing in front of the specter and it's killing you, the threat's pretty high that day.
Yeah, I mean, it's perspective, right? It's respective to where you're at and where you're born with, and what you know and what you don't know. And that is kind of where they are at. But that is also their life norm that they have been able to manage to work in and figure out different things. And you can actually learn, believe it or not, like I learned a lot from the Afghans when it came to how they conducted business. And some of the stuff that we rely so heavily on technology on, they have some very simple solutions for. And some of that stuff works really, really well. I also think, intelligence goes down to perspective as well, right? Like we look at these people over in the Middle East as Westerners. A lot of people over in the West look at them as very unintelligent human beings. And the fact is some of them have extremely high IQs, and they are able to get a lot of things accomplished because they simply outthink you. And that outthinking is what gets them there. It's true. I mean, that outthinking is the difference between life or death. So it doesn't matter technology. If I can outthink technology, it doesn't matter what tech you have. If I can think of a simple workaround.
Yeah. Again, I'm going to be hard on the State Department and USAID. When those dudes showed up, I'm like, because I'm working for the boss. I'm looking who's causing trouble internally, right? Enforce protection, all this stuff goes into that. And if I see a USAID guy sitting over there, I don't care what the governor says. I don't care what that tribe elder says. I care what that motherfucker says, because he's probably fucking shit up. for sure, the State Department guy, I had a State Department guy pshaw and roll his eyes at a governor of an Afghan province over shit that was under the governor's purview. And I about chokeslammed that dude because, like, first off, this governor is the governor. And this is 2011, right? Like, these guys are doing their own stuff. And this guy's mocking him. And, you know, I just lose my mind. It just drives me crazy. And again, this arrogance to think that you're smarter than everybody in the room. You don't even know how these people survive in 4-degree weather outside, but there they are doing it. How are they doing that? You can't handle that, you fucking State Department pussy. You know,
right.
Like, oh my God, you can see I get mad about these things, but that's because the arrogance that comes with that, right? That, you know, religion doesn't matter. This is whatever, or saying this is a sectarian fight. And it's impossible for Sunni and Shia to shake hands and go fight against something else. And you and I have already discussed, of course they do. Of course, Iran works with Saudi Arabia when it suits their combined purposes.
Yep. You just got to have the right motives in place, and all of a sudden, all that goes away. It really does.
Right. Yeah. I get so mad, man. So when we start going after USAID, I relish it because, okay, look, forget about the fact that they're one-sided politically just for half a second. Forget about the fact that they're laundering money, because I think everybody launders money. But just the fact that you go out and you can't reliably do something that you say you're going to do. I had USAID people who worked in Afghanistan and say, oh, that's really not our game. That's really not what we do. And I'm like, what the fuck do you mean it's not what you do? Why are you there? Like, it's just too hard for us. We're not built for that.
Yeah. We don't do that, but we supply like millions of dollars for transgender plays and thousands of dollars for comic books. Like we do those things, but no, helping out in the war effort. No, that's not us. That's not where we're at. No. Yeah. And it's amazing if you go and you look, if you go over, look, I think it's like gov spending or something like that. If you go and you actually look up how much money we have given to Afghanistan over the last 4 years, it would blow your mind. Blow your mind. Go take a look.
And the main thing I would say about all this is, we should be upset that someone's going through this place and tearing shit apart. We should be upset that they didn't do it sooner, because this has been around for a long time. And again, State Department too. Like, they are a bunch of arrogant, wasteful dicks, and they will lie to themselves. They're always worried about what the ambassador thinks or what the Secretary of State thinks. They're never worried about what the governor across the street, who they're trying to help, needs to run there. They're never worried about that. It's always up at everybody's ass. And that's why we struggled to win these things. It wasn't so much that we prepared for the wrong fight, but we also had all these bad actors who are working with us who are also incompetent. Everybody's trying their best on a given day. We all read the books and all that bullshit. But if you can't deliver and have your delivery checked by somebody else, like me or somebody else, go, hey, I don't see that win that you said you had, then we shouldn't go. You know, like when Bob Gates is like, don't leave Afghanistan, we didn't have the license to stay. We didn't earn it. We fucked around and we wasted out opportunity, because even though we've all deployed there, look at it. How much better is it now? You know, and we didn't take that fight seriously. We didn't adapt fast enough. We got our asses kicked for
it. Did you see the post that I made about Donald Trump trying to secure funding for Ukraine by having them use rare earth materials as collateral?
No, I didn't see that. No. So
that's a thing, right? Yeah. So Donald Trump made a really brief statement, and to me, it has like one of the biggest impacts. Everybody was saying, like, look, when Trump gets into office, he's going to cut funding from Ukraine. He's a Russian shill. He's this and he's that. It's like, well, he's a smart guy and he listens to his advisors, and we know that. Like we've seen that. We have actual testimony of him 100% taking the advice of his advisors. And so when he steps into office and he gets briefed up on the entire situation, he's correct. Now, the goal is, when it comes to Ukraine, obviously it should have a national security objective in mind, right? For the United States of America. And we should have our strategic objectives, our operational objectives, and all that crap laid out for what we need to see get accomplished. And when he said that we are going to secure it with rare earth material, one of my followers actually tipped me off to this, that the big lithium mines are underneath Donetsk, and there's a massive one over in Crimea. And so if Zelensky ends up saying that, hey, you'll get your stuff, we'll pay you back out of those mines, that means that the United States is now in it. So we secure those mines with them, right? All the funding. And so it would be an enormous amount of funding that's going to come up front so that they can actually plan and move forward. under the Biden administration, they were kind of like hamstrung along with, we'll pass this bill here, and then maybe we'll be able to get you this bill here. But this would allow like actual collateral back over behind it for us to actually be able to provide everything that they need in order to step it up. I think the other interesting thing, it was just yesterday, I think, that I saw that Trump lifted the ban that Biden had in place for not using US made weapons against Russia outside of like the Kursk region, right? Or outside of like specific areas. And so now we're going to be able to use some of those cruise missiles to actually start attacking it deeper into Russia, which is a very good thing. Ukraine's had a lot of success with their drones and everything else. And I think it's going to put Putin in one of those predicaments where he's like, maybe I do need to come to the table.
Yeah, man, there's a lot in that, and I can't talk too much about Ukraine, but I can say this: there are billionaires that are desperate in Ukraine, who are desperate to do what they do, process dirt into money, right? Rare earth minerals, titanium, whatever it's going to be, and they can do this for days. And so what we don't have to do, and thankfully we've got the State Department looking in different directions, and USAID hopefully won't be involved because they think small. But hopefully these industrialists can go out and do industrial shit. And what they want to do is they get this. You're going to love this part. And this is firsthand knowledge, right? Primary source right here. We want to become a competitor to China, and we want to look to you guys in the West. We want you guys to be our market. All right, let's go. Let's do that, Right. But we can't go there and be like, we need green energy. Why don't you build a solar farm here? Like, no, motherfucker, they got energy in the ground right here. Extract that out and put it to work and allow these guys who already know how to build gigantic machines that turn things into things. Let those dudes do that, and Ukraine will rebound faster than we can imagine. We don't need to get in their way. We need to get out of their way, and if they're going to use some futures on rare earth, great, let's do that. But let's not force them to empower women or whatever these things are that, like, look, that's adorable. Go do that in 10 years when they have everybody's working and they're busy. As a matter of fact, don't even do it ever. You don't have this. Again, this is where I get upset. But we want to engage other people's women. We don't have the license to do that. I really notable anthropologist. Her name is Benedicta Grima. And I was asking her, and I was like, what does it take to become, licensed, credentialed to go engage with Pashtun women? And she's like, no, you don't. You never do it. And I'm like, well, never. I mean, come on, we can put a program together, college degree. She's like, Pete, you cannot develop that skill. Not me, because I'm a dude. Women, anybody. She's like, you do not do that. That's not what the military does. Don't ever even think about it. Don't consider it. Don't engage their women. Right? This is from a fucking professional. This is the Ayman Dean of dealing with women in the Pashtun world. And she said, don't fucking do it. So hopefully we won't do all that stuff. Hopefully. And I'm not against women. I'm for women. But I don't want to. If you don't care enough to make sure that they're actually okay 5 days after you talk to them, then you don't care enough to go there, is what I'm saying.
Right.
Is that fair?
Right.
That's
and,
fair, right?
And nor are you going to get a good return out of it. If you go in with the idea over in those locations of, hey, I'm going to go talk to women and try to get some info off of them or try to build them up or whatever. If they don't feel secure, you're going to get the cold shoulder every time. And so that was, one of the things that we ran into with a lot of the people, to where we could be out in a location for, months before we actually earn the trust of, hey, these guys are actually here to protect us. And then we would start getting people to come over. And it's a long process, and it sucks when that trust is broken, because that's your word that you're putting on it. And it's sad that the politicians are the ones that, take those words. They'll tell us, no, you're set and you're good. And we'll go forward acting in good faith on that, telling them in good faith what we have been told. And then our government turns around and changes its mind anyways. And unfortunately, that's happened a lot. It's happened a lot, ever since Vietnam, that's happened. And we haven't been able to pull our heads out of our ass and solve that equation yet, because our word used to mean something. And right now it's almost a joke. Go ask the Kurds if they feel like the U.S. is properly supporting them.
Oh my God. How many times have we turned our back on those poor bastards? I mean, it is the norm, right? We're going to go crawfish on every single deal with those guys.
Well, we need them when we need them. We need them when we need them, and like at some point in time, we should just be like, let's say Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas, Guam, American Samoa, right? Like I can start naming off all of these other places that are districts and territories. It might be time for us to get a new district or territory, right?
Sure.
The Commonwealth of the Kurds. I don't know. You know what I mean? But it's about to that standard. That way we actually have somebody over there that we need it. So,
I mean, I'm being a little bit flip here, and I'm hard on Biden because of this. But when he was talking favorably about the Kurds and all these other things, well, draw a circle around the map, call that Kurdistan, and say I recognize these guys, and a whole bunch of dominoes are going to fall after that. But there's going to be a lot of countries that be like, well, fuck, I guess we're on board with that plan. You know, Teddy Roosevelt invented Panama. Go out and go and invent Kurdistan. Just do it, and it'll be done.
Right, and then you've got the other problem of a NATO ally, which is Turkey. That would not be happy with that decision. But Turkey's been crooked as hell for the long as I can remember anyways. I'm not a big fan of Turkey.
And nothing border-wise has to change. You just say we recognize that as a distinct nation from Tikrit North and let Iraq deal with the Tikrit problem on their own. Those guys can go negotiate that. But look, but he didn't have the guts to do it, right? And so we're like, oh, talk about how the Kurds and all the poor Assyrians and how they've been treated and everything. It's awful. It's awful. I want to get into this pier because I want to talk about this thing because this was the original premise.
Let's do it.
I don't want to run out of time. But I guess give us the story about the pier and why it matters and who was hurt and why are we talking about it?
Yeah. So here's why the pier matters. It is because we spent $320 million on it and a U.S. service member lost their life during the construction. Well, they got injured during the construction of it. The circumstances behind his injury, we don't know. We know that 2 other service members were injured during the construction of that back in May. We know that in April, Israel had approved to allow humanitarian aid entering in through the port of Ashdod in Israel proper, so outside of the Gaza Strip. So this pier was set to be anchored down inside Gaza. You take the Netzarim corridor and just head due west until you hit the Med, and you're gonna run into the pier. Got made famous during the hostage rescue operation back in June from the Nasrallah refugee camp, where they had alleged U.S. Special Forces had done it because they had airlifted the hostages out to go back to safety. Speed to the rear is pretty standard when it comes to hostage rescue, right? So they went straight up the road, got to the most secure location, which was right outside the pier because the IDF does control that, put them on a helicopter and flew them out. Smart. It's the way to do it, right? But the issue is that pier didn't need to be there in the first place. And when you go back and you look at the timeline in February, the Famine Review Committee had published a report stating that people were starving. They weren't. And they admitted that in their June report that they were wrong. And in their June report, underneath the executive summary, they even said there's no evidence of famine, right? At this time, there's no evidence of famine. In this context, there's no evidence of this time of famine. So famine is not occurring. But the key takeaway of all of this is you had that report come out. People start complaining about humanitarian issues and hunger and everything taking place over inside of Gaza. And the IDF is lined up, outside of Gaza, on the southernmost portion inside of Israel, getting ready to go into Rafah. And Israel had bought and paid for a bunch of weapons from the United States. Well, we held up those weapon shipments from going into Israel, essentially using it as leverage to keep them from invading Rafah. And this is where we have Kamala Harris coming out saying that I've studied the maps and there's no way for those people to go. Well, she didn't pass the fucking STAR course, I can tell you that, because if she did, she'd have known that it was about about a 1 hour walk to get from Rafah to city center of freaking Khan Yunis or up over to the ocean. Just basically get the hell out of Dodge. And the people ended up evacuating anyways, right? Before Israel ended up going in, but they held it up and they did it under this guise of hostage negotiations for so long and holding those munitions, all the while building this pier that they didn't need to build. The pier ended up breaking, I think, 3 times before they finally decommissioned it. It was only operational for a couple of days. The word that I got from the people that have intimate knowledge of it is only about 3 days worth of humanitarian aid actually got offloaded from the pier. So we're spending $320+ million. Soldier gets killed for a pier that we didn't have to do. And the best part is after it got decommissioned, then we end up coming out and saying all of the humanitarian aid that would go through that pier is going to go through the port of Ashdod anyways. Great. Yeah. Why not just send it up there? So, but the whole idea is that at that same time, we had college students that were getting pissed off and rioting. A lot of the propaganda and narrative had been pushed out, and Biden's now teetering on this scale to where he's, not so much popular on the Republican side because of his actions over inside of Ukraine, and he's not so popular on the Democrat side because of his actions inside Israel. So his, popularity plummets down to the 30% range. And he's going to do something. And so he's going to plead to his base. We're going to stop Israel from doing this. We're going to push negotiations. Biden even mentioned carpet bombing, and he knows damn good and well Israel hasn't been carpet bombing. I mean, it's just absurd. So he does all of those things. A service member gets killed, tax dollars gets wasted. And the best part, this guy was injured. And about, I think it was 2 weeks before he actually died, or maybe it was a week prior to him dying, is when he actually is officially processed out of the Army. And so the Army doesn't even have to officially announce his death. And nobody's asking questions on why the hell did we build that pier in the first place?
Yeah.
Which it didn't need to happen.
Has the -6 been completed on that? It's got to be by now, right? That's legally required by now to be done.
I would hope so. I would absolutely hope so. But again,
-6,
I mean,
everybody's
this is
an investigation into something like this. -6 is an investigation. That's all. Go ahead.
But I mean, why hasn't then there been a congressional inquiry or investigation as to why all of this happened? Because if I was a military commander in that region and I get told my mission is to get humanitarian aid supplies into Gaza, facilitate this, what is the quickest, best, safest way to get these in there? Well, the quick, best, and safest way to get them in there is through the port of Ashdod, which Israel had approved the month prior in April. Right before the United States wants to start building on this sucker. Yeah. So the infrastructure already exists, and it's in a secure environment, which you can control.
Yeah. So there's a guy everybody can follow named Scott Richards. He's on X, and he is instrumental in these kinds of things. He may have some thoughts. I'll get him on and talk. If you want to come on, you can join us. But he gets into the, I don't want to say higher level, but like he'll work for the government of Taliban to help them understand something that's going on.
Sure.
So he's a good broker for these things and likely has intimate knowledge of that decision. I don't know what he thinks about that pier, but I know we make things complicated. I also know that we had look, I'm not against Secretary Austin. He had a great career, but I also watched him say several times, I don't know how many Americans are in this country and I can't protect them. And you only get to say that so many times before you got to go. And so when this pier happens, why isn't somebody fired? Why is it that we never see anybody above the grade of 05 ever pay a cost for getting things wrong? And this, like, your job was to build a pier and eject supplies off of it. All right, you didn't do that. Relieved. Well,
like why build the pier in the first place? Where did that order come from to build the pier?
I agree with you there.
Biden announced it. So it's on the national level, right? So Biden announces this. Somebody presented them that as an option that, hey, our military is capable of doing this. Granted, we haven't done it in a really long time and it's got a really, low expectancy with the waves and all this other crap. But at least we can say that we're doing something, and I promise you that he was briefed. And that's why there needs to be a congressional inquiry, because if Biden's the jackwagon that made that decision, that's not okay. And people need to know about it. Or if Kamala Harris or whoever is responsible for saying, no, we need to do this, their ass needs fired, period. Yeah, because they are quite literally, and I bet you there's emails that attest to this. I bet you if you search, there would be emails that would attest that this was politically motivated. And so now we've got government officials, using our military personnel and getting them killed for politics. That's not acceptable.
Yeah. I don't mind you putting our folks in harm's way to do the mission, but you have to go through the process and you get to pick a more dangerous mission, right? But we know that Marines in the last 5 years can't reliably float in from the coast of San Diego without putting a bunch of Marines on the bottom of the ocean. It's just hard. And if you don't practice, you don't train it. And if you can't produce results, then that one goes off the table. If you're a boss, you're like, no, and we're especially not going to do this at night. Night's even harder. But we don't seem to reliably do that. And I don't know why that is. And it's certainly, the accountability is never there. I'll see a bunch of congressional people point their finger and yell at some guy, and then they all go out and have drinks or something later on because nothing ever happens afterwards. It's very frustrating to see that.
Right. But this young man died. Sergeant Quandarius Stanley died over this. And his life after he got injured was not amazing by any means. You can go, his family did a couple local news interviews and stuff, and you can go look, he was doing bad. And the problem is they moved him when he ended up getting, medically retired or medically discharged, whatever it was that they ended up doing, they moved him to a VA hospital. And his mom's sitting there and complaining like, he was perfectly stable. We don't understand why this would have happened. So he ends up losing that level of care that he was getting pushed into the VA hospital, and now he's dead.
I'm just going to say this about the VA. The VA does a lot of things well, and there's a lot of wonderful people in there. But the next time they say to me, well, you can't have that. What if everybody got that? Motherfucker, when the boss said, ruck up and go, I went. The contract is, now you guys got to do your job. I don't care how much it costs. That's on you. That's on Congress.
Yeah.
Go appropriate
Correct.
more funds. By the way,
Stop,
not all the
stop
veterans
spending it
are
on
in this fucking
transgender
system.
plays. Stop
Yeah,
spending the money on transgender plays. And that's the bottom line, right? Like when you take and you give the victims of Hawaii X amount of dollars and the people over in North Carolina, whatever, X amount of dollars, but you're spending just exponential rates on just stupid stuff. You don't need to spend $20 million on Sesame Street, man. You don't.
Right.
You don't.
Yeah.
To $10,000 COVID relief funds going to strippers.
Yeah. What's the return? You know, what are we getting for that money? Because I as a taxpayer, I get to know that. You know, even if you. Sure,
I think the way they're looking at the Sesame Street deal is like, you know, fighting that human terrain and diversity and inclusion, you know, in a place that just passed a law where it is possible now for 9-year-old girls to get married depending on religious leaders, right? So
yeah.
You're fighting that. And so part of that is fighting that human terrain. But I guarantee you our government is not the ones that are projecting the messages on, you know, Sesame Street, Iraq. They're just not.
Look up the countries that still permit stoning as a punishment for legal crimes on the world. And you're not going to see a bunch of European countries, you know?
No.
It's
no.
Yeah. There's some countries that, And what's not going to work there is promoting the things that we think are the problem. You know, unless you know they're the human terrain, right? Unless you know that, go there and understand. You can't presume to improve the condition of something that you refuse to understand the condition of. You can't. And so we show up and like, you guys need small business loans. That's what you need. You know, I mean, I know you've seen those programs, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? Oh, this guy's going to become a small engine repair guy, you know?
Right. It drives me nuts, dude.
Well,
number one, it's wasteful spending. Number two, it's just spending money to spend money. Like a lot of that crap nobody wants and nobody cares for. And that's like the God's honest truth. And a lot of that crap ends up getting pillaged anyways and sold on the black market. So not only are we paying for him to do it, but then the infrastructure is not remaining. And then it ends up getting sold. And so we are just literally spending money on nothing.
I came across the lady who worked for an NGO, aka paid for by either state or USAID, and her super skill was getting Iraqi men credentialed at the lowest level to use Microsoft Office. That was her contribution. Yeah,
that tracks.
And just like, hey, do they need that? Do they not already know that? I've seen. You know, you see these people like, oh, we have to go to the villages and show these ladies how to use tampons. And I'm like, no, don't do that.
Well, there is people over there that don't understand reproduction inside of human beings.
I'm fine with that. You don't start with the women. You start with the men and say, hey, we have women who focus on medical things. Who is interested in having us come out and help? And this will help, you know, whatever, right? You do it with the process. You don't just show up. You don't invent the period and say, hey, jam this thing in your hoo-ha and everything's going to be aces. You know, like you don't do that. And by the way, you don't get to go once and never come back. Right. That's not doing anything. Like you have to actually,
it's a waste.
Like you care if it works.
It's a waste.
Yeah.
It's an absolute waste. It's a waste. It's a waste of taxpayer dollars, and it degrades, you know, kind of how they view us as people as well, because you go right back to the human terrain. So it's degrading us as well. It's degrading our mission. It's degrading everything. The female engagement teams, awesome concept, stupid. Good concept from a Western point of view, from understanding the local population.
Sure.
Absolutely dumb.
Yeah. And the female teams that supported the SEALs, you know, not terribly effective. They'll tell you that they are. Here's how you know. So I wrote this paper about the FETs and this, I think they're called the CSTs. And when we wrote the thing, the title was basically female empowerment, you know, and things besides that. And before we even got to the abstract, we would be getting attacked because they'd want to know which women we were talking about, ours or theirs. And yet we were lectured that you can't, women are empowered. Well, you haven't even read the abstract. You don't even know what's going on. And there was already this fight, which is part of the reason why we wrote it, was to start this thing to show like you're so passionate about something, you're so desperate for it to happen, that you haven't slowed down to understand what the process might be. A commander has an ethos, has got a job. And if a commander's got to run a wedge through a town because you're doing a presence patrol, and he's got to bring a female in from the outside because, like, I'm not going to risk you getting snatched up because you're tasty delights, and so you're going to run in the middle with me. You're putting that all to the commander, and so, like, that's one of a bunch of, and that wasn't our example. That was a commander, like, hey, we're walking through that village. I'm just like, I'm African, I'm Arabic, I'm an American commander now, but I know what my men want from that women, and I'm not going to expose her to that. No, they're not going to drive the truck. No, they're not going to do this because I'm not going to risk what happens when they get abducted.
No, and I'd put them, like, if we ever had them, I would make sure that they were hidden somewhere because I didn't want to get perceived as a soft target. And you call it what you will, but back then that was automatic female around. That is a non-combat arms MOS that's on the ground. Therefore, they must be a soft target, right? Now they can obviously tell a little bit difference in how you conduct business, but it's not a risk I'm going to take. Further, there's nothing, if I needed to get words out of a woman, I would get words out of a woman over there. If I needed a woman to talk, we could get them to talk. It just, and I've seen women roll over on their husbands. Oh, there was women that were not aware of what their husbands were doing. And so when you kick in the door and you go into their house and you start pulling shit out of drawers and, buried in the backyard and everything else, and you start showing them these things, they get pissed. They get pissed because they have kids in the house and all of that other stuff. And they will narc on that dude. They will go off.
No, 100%.
Sometimes.
That's 100% true. Yeah. You and I both have seen that. And also they'll go into town and they'll go to the, when you love this, when you see, they go to their own police and they're like, hey, my husband is out doing these things. We need to do something about this, but here's the thing is they're not going to handle it in the courts. They're going to handle it between the two of them. And then they're going to deal with whatever comes next. And it's really not American business at that point. And as long as we allow that win to happen, it'll happen. And that lady will go back to that cop every time she's got a problem.
Yeah,
but
100%.
What doesn't help is when we decide what women need to be without ever talking to them, their men. We did a thing on female reading in this one area. We were just kind of like assessing it. And so one dude is like, man, we were using the radio, the old crank radio. And like, we'd send lessons out, not we, but like Americans. And so we started grabbing up these lesson books and just looking at them and going through them and saying, hey, we grabbed 50 different lessons books from all these different areas. Here's what we've learned, right? The main thing that we learned was one household would say, the daughter, she loves the music. She loves the radio. I can't get it out of her hand. What am I going to do? She's too adorable. I leave her alone. If she learns how to read, I love it. I don't care about it, right? The neighbor next door is like, I see her touch that radio one more time. She's going to get the back of this hand. Twice. And you're like, holy fuck, he's going to beat his daughter for listening to the radio. Right. What about the reading program? No. You're like, all right. So we can't map that valley into an area where we can safely predict we're not going to get people whipped.
Right. And dude.
Yes. Exactly.
I can't. Yeah. Like, politics need to stay the hell out of the military. Military should be used for two things: break shit and kill people. And outside of that, stay the hell out of it. If you want somebody to come in and do politicking, bring in politicians, right? But don't put that on the military. It's not like there is a lot of formal training courses for us to be dealing with all of that stuff, and nor should we. There is, units that are designed for those types of things, allow those units to do it. But we ended up putting that onus on like ground force commanders, in very remote regions to be able to handle that. And so now they're soldiers and diplomats as they're moving out to go do those things and conduct those operations. It just doesn't work that way. And they know, by the way, those people know whether or not you are a barrel-chested freedom fighter or you're a pushover. And if you're a pushover, you're going to get pushed over. And if you're one of those commanders that's like I don't want to use the term DEI hire because it doesn't really exist in the military, but if that is kind of like your mentality going into it and you want to capitulate to like everything that they have to say, you get zero respect. And with violence being the currency, you better be prepared to use it. You better be able to prepared to spend every single dime that you have over there to get your point across.
Yeah. I may be a little bit scooch over from you on that, but I don't think we're that far apart. I have seen females rocking a Modus on a patrol and could rack around, smoke a cigarette at the same time. And I'm like, that's a competent person, and I got to know that soldier a little bit, and she could handle her job. She was in an MP unit, right? And so she's rolling around in the back of on top of a Humvee, standing up, and she could handle that form of combat. I've seen badass chicks doing CA stuff, and they weren't afraid to patrol. They could do their job. I have no problem with people like that, right? I don't know. Look, if you want to put women in infantry roles, okay, there's 5'2" dudes in the infantry, and I'm not a big believer in the hey, you can't carry Pete out. Nobody's going to carry me. You know, like we have litters for a reason, and so yeah, sure, maybe I got to get dragged out, but that is so rare an instance that it shouldn't be a discriminator. I don't want to have a weaker force, but I am saying, I'm going to finish this. I am saying that we might have to reassess what the standard needs to be. And by the way, ask me how many push-ups I've done in combat, and the number is 0, right? So there is some kind of
I used to say that too.
Yeah. I mean, like, what the fuck does it matter? You know, yeah, anyhow, I don't want to get distracted by that. Because
I know somebody that's done burpees.
There is a place for women on the ground. Sorry, go ahead.
As I say, I know somebody that's done burpees to draw sniper fire, but it was actually starburst with a twist. But anyways, sorry.
Yeah. So I don't mind the military becoming more lethal. I would want, if we're going to do what we keep doing, which is go places and get involved in people's shit, I would want some of those courses that you're talking about being designed. Like we need to have a multi-level course where you learn how to work with an interpreter. We can't work from this position of lack of trust. We have to learn how to build trust and have them understand our mission so that they can be the better version of me than I can be. We don't think about it that way. And you know as well as I do, most of us operator guys, and I'm going to put myself in your class for a minute here, we have way more conversations than we fire bullets in combat, because that's a big part of what we do. We don't have specific training that's elite, like a scuba school elite, or any of these other schools that you can go to. We don't go to these kind of training reliably. Now, maybe some people get into them, that kind of thing. But when you deploy someone, they care, again, if you're DEI trained or if you know the computer security thing. But I'm going to go be talking. I got to go find warlords. That's my job. I got to go find the most dangerous dudes, get them to chill out, maybe even come to our side, right? I don't need to worry about offending someone in the talk. I need to get out and go do hard shit. But we don't train like that's important. We train like whatever. And then we send tankers out to go do these complex jobs when they qualify in their tanks like they're supposed to, right? So that's that lethality thing. Let those guys be lethal and then build people who do other things that focus on politics or advising. Like, you know, Boyd Austin's advise and assist concept. Great. Who's licensed to do that? Some fucking lieutenant's going to go partner with a general? No, that don't work.
No, and it didn't work out good for them either. You know, I remember like meetings with like Afghan generals to where you would have, you know, an U.S. Army general sitting in there, and they don't want to pay them the freaking time of day, but they're willing to talk to us. I mean, they just have no respect. It's a very big respect-based culture, very like all of that. And granted, you have rank, but your competence level on what needs to get accomplished at that level, you're a politician. They don't want politicians. They want people that are going to get shit done. And unfortunately, they're just not good at it. So,
yeah. Well, fair enough. We covered a lot of ground, Matt. I don't want to take any more of your time. You're super busy, and just from me to you, I appreciate the hell out of what you're doing. I love you out there. Just like that live coverage of the plane crash in Pennsylvania was just, it's impressive. And I don't see that on the regular news, and you're trying to figure shit out in real time. And that's a tightrope there, but you're doing it and you're doing it well. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on. Anytime you want to come on the show, and you're welcome to do it.
I appreciate you, brother. Yeah. I mean, don't always get everything right, and do my best to issue retractions or correct myself when I get it wrong. I mean, it's just kind of like a nature of the beast, you know. That's why I give politicians, when they're speaking publicly, a little bit of leeway, because I've done it for so long now where I'm like, I get it. Like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not what he meant, you know, or hold on, let's see what the actual plan is. You know, like the U.S. is not sending troops into Gaza. Everybody calm the hell down. Like, that's not what he said anyway. So yeah, but thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that's always that. All right, stand by. I'll hang up. Everybody else, thank you very much. See you tomorrow. Actually, I'll see you later on. We're going to have Robert Hunter on in about an hour and a half.
Okay, folks. Well, that wraps